Good morning, everyone. Shavua Tov. Here is a new week. We're on a new week. This week, the end of this week is my birthday. That's right. That's right. Happy birthday to me. And here is charity. First of all, let's give. God gives us everything. Let's give a little bit back. Right? It says in the Talmud that God purposely makes certain people rich and certain people poor in order that the rich person will give to the poor person. That's the idea of charity. That's really what's wrong with communism. That's because there's no charity. The government's supposed to take care of everybody, which in fact the government just takes from everybody. Okay, here we go. Ready? Let's go. Charity. It saves from all bad things and it brings all good things. Charity. And let's also say a little prayer to the creator of the universe. Hodu Hashem ki tov ki olam hasdo. Let us give thanks to God because he's good. Forever is his kindness. And also la'olam means forever, but it also means to the world. His kindness is revealed in the world. Right. Now we're going to learn from a book which is called Torah Ohr. See, this is the Torah Ohr. It's a book by the first of collected speeches by the first Rebbe of Chabad. It was actually collected from thousands and thousands of speeches that he did, but they filtered it down to this number. Okay, so today's going to be a little bit Kabbalistic. Let's see what we got over here. 1 second, 1 minute. Good morning. Okay, so this week, we're going to get a little bit Kabbalistic over here. Kabbalistic, but Kabbalistic as is explained by Hasidut. One of the purposes of Hasidut, Hasidut in general, the Baal Shem Tov, is to make God user-friendly. Right? Just to remind everybody, the God of the Jews, Elokei Yisrael, is different from how all the other religions see God. It's different. 10 Commandments. The God of Israel personally took all the Jews out of Egypt. That's the first of the 10 Commandments. I'm God that took you out of Egypt. So we have a God that cares about everybody. On the other hand, the God of Israel creates the whole world. Fourth of the 10 Commandments. 6 days God created the world, the seventh day rested. And if you look at this, if you think about it for a moment, before the world was created, what was there? There was nothing. So it ends up that the world was created from nothing. It says God created the heavens and the earth. The heavens are the spiritual worlds and the earth is physical. So God created everything from nothing. So it means that we're all made from nothing. How does that feel to know that you're nothing? But which is true. But on the other hand, God is always miraculously bringing us from nothing to something. So we're very important. Who is doing this, bringing us constantly from nothing to something? The God of Israel. That he cares about every single detail of every single human being and animal and plant and whatever it is, and mineral and atoms and things like that. So that's the God of Israel. So we're learning about this. And if God creates the spiritual, it means that God, the God that we're praying to, is not spiritual. He's above the spiritual. He's creating the spiritual. So God is infinitely, infinitely, infinitely further from us than we can possibly imagine. I mean, he's not far from us in spirit because he creates the spirit. He's not even in that category at all. Not even in that category. And also, God is not far away from us physically because he creates that also. So what does it mean God is far away from us? It's just a different type of reality. On the other hand, God cares about us. He's infinitely involved in us. And even more, he reacts to what we do. When we pray, God, the essence of God, reacts to what we do. And if you pray to anything in between, that's called idolatry. And the reason is very simple, because idolatry means you're thinking about yourself. You want some sort of a benefit. So what's at hand, you just take whatever's at hand. Like a thief, just the money is there, so I just took it. But worshiping God is not so easy on one hand because God is infinitely far away from us. But on the other hand, God is infinitely close to us because he cares about us. So to avoid the pitfalls, which is very easy to get into idolatry. I mean, by the way, atheism is also a form of idolatry because people worship themselves. They worship themselves. I mean, who is the ultimate reality? Me. So that's you're worshiping yourself. I think there's who calls the shots, who tells me what's good and what's bad? Me. So that's also so everything other than the God of Israel, to some degree, one way or another, is missing the point. Let's not call it idolatry, but it certainly is missing the point. Okay, now Atzilut comes to explain a little bit what is this God of Israel that we're supposed to be praying to, and that's creating us all the time, and that cares about what we do, and if he's infinitely far away, how did he get infinitely close? How does that work? Maybe there's two gods. There's one God, he's like really far away, and then there's the Son of God or the Spirit of God or the something of God that's really close to us. Well, that's idolatry. That's already getting into idolatry. So there's only one God. There's only one reality. So how does this thing work out? So this is what's going to explain this. It says in our week's Torah portion, the story of Sodom and Amorah. In English, it's called Gomorrah. I don't know how they got to the Aleph, got changed to a Gimel, but it did. Sodom and Gomorrah, right? So what happened over there? Sodom and Gomorrah, they were very cruel people. They were very cruel. And they tortured and they did also. Basically what it comes down to is they were practical jokers. They loved to see other people suffer. It really gave them tremendous pleasure. Once in a while, I know they post on what is it, YouTube, whatever. These people are practical jokers. I mean, I always complain bitterly about it, so I don't get it very often. But I used, people that put a tack on somebody's chair, or they pull the chair out from underneath them, and haha, everybody laughs. I think those things are just abhorrent, to say the least, right? Those people who do practical jokes, I think that they should be beaten up by the person who they pull a joke on, or any bystander that cares should beat them up, and they should be sued, and they should be put into jail. And that's just terrible. I mean, it's just any case, that's what they did in Sodom and Gomorrah, and they had a really good time. There would come a guest, they would torture the guest, everybody would be happy. So God says a very interesting thing. He says, I'm going to go down and see why are these screams coming up to me from Sodom and Gomorrah. What's the screams? I will go down and I will see what are their screams about. What does it mean God says I'm going to go down? What does it mean I'm going to go down? And what is this aspect of God that's saying I am going to go down? What does it mean? Who's talking over here? So again, God is infinitely far than we can possibly imagine. But on the other hand, here we have the Torah. God is talking. God is writing. God wrote a book. It doesn't make any sense, but that's the fact. God has a will. God is a thing. God creates us. That's what the whole Torah is about. How important we are to God. All the creations. Okay. So now we're going to understand how it is that God is infinitely far away, and how does it come down that God can be infinitely close to us and that he cares about us. He cares about me and he cares about you. How could this be? So we'll see. How does God do it? Unless we say that there's just a lot of gods, which that sort of makes sense. I mean, if there's one God, that doesn't make any sense. So if there's 50 gods, it also doesn't make any sense. So what difference does it make how many gods there are? The whole business doesn't make sense. We're all talking about gods. No, can't. Oh, it's forbidden. First, second commandment, 10 commandments. You can only worship me. I'm the God that took you out of Egypt. There cannot be any other gods. And that's defining what is God. God took the Jews out of Egypt. God creates the world. Fourth of the 10 commandments. And you can't worship any other God. This God who creates you and who took the Jews out of Egypt is a jealous God. He doesn't want you to worship any other gods. And obviously, if he creates everything, so he creates other gods as well. He creates all these pitfalls and these, fake gods, semi-gods and quasi-gods and what do they call it? The demigods. I don't know if that's the right word. Okay, ready? Let's go. Okay, so there's a book that explains, it really starts to explain this, and that's the whole essence of what Judaism is to worship this one God, but as much as possible to understand that this one God is infinitely close to us and simultaneously infinitely far from us. And then there's what we call Jacob's ladder, that there's all these rungs of godliness that we can approach the essence of God with. Which, by the way, the essence of God is the one that's close to us. That's the one that's close to us. That's the essence of God. Okay, let's talk about this, because that's the whole thing of the Torah, that God cares about us. He talked. It wasn't God is just boring, or he was bored, or he just got an inspiration one day and he wrote some novel, and it's called the Bible or something like that. Okay. So there's a book which is called the Zohar. And the book which is called the Zohar was written by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, despite what other people say that it's not so. It was written by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and it was written about 1,800 years ago. And it explains, at least in the introduction to do it, it explains a little bit what is the God that we believe in, the Jewish people believe in. A lot of people say this in Chabad also, we say it right before Shabbos. It's a whole paragraph. And it says, Patach Eliyahu, Elijah the prophet, he came to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and he said, Elijah the prophet obviously was not alive in any normal sense. I mean, it says he went up to heaven in a fiery chariot. He didn't really die. So he came to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and he says, God, and you, and God, he's talking about God. And God, and Huchad, you are one, below bechushban, but not in a numerical one. You are one, God, below bechushban, but you're not a number. You're not a number. There's no number two. Antu the afikat aser tikunim. God, you emanate 10 what do we want to call it? 10 tikkunim. The Rebbe is going to explain that this is like jewels, but 10 let's see what we want to call it. 10 aspects, let's call it. Okay, 10 aspects, just for the sake of calling it a name. You emanate 10 aspects. Okay, so here we have God is essence, but he creates the world. Just for instance, I mean, I know we talked about this before, but I know I keep saying that also over and over. We've talked about this before, but God created the world in 7 days, right? 7 days. According to Judaism, God created the world from nothing. So he created also time, and he created place. He created everything. So obviously, if God created time, it couldn't have taken him 7 days to create time. I mean, time is very difficult. How did God create time? What does that mean? So time is the interaction between the spiritual and the physical. And the spiritual and the physical are also creations, right? That's why you have a pulse. You have a pulse, and also there's day and there's nighttime, because the spiritual is infinitely distant, so to speak, from the physical, but the physical needs it to keep alive. On the other hand, the only reason that there's spiritual is in order to keep the physical alive. It's just it's like a soul in the body. The only reason there's a soul is to keep the body alive. That's the reason there's a soul. God doesn't want, when people die, it's a terrible tragedy because the soul separates from the body, but the soul is still there. So a soul without a body, that's a tragedy. That's not good. But a body without a soul is also a tragedy. So what connects the body and the soul together that's called time. It's a pulse, the pulse of time. Pulse of time. So why did God create the world in 7 days? Why didn't he just create the world? I mean, if he created the world, so that's it. Just create the whole thing. To go from zero, from nothing to be something, that's infinitely more distant than to go from something to be 1,000 somethings, 1,000,000 something. So the answer is, why did God take 7 days? Right. So that goes according to this, what's called the 7 sfirot, the lower aspect of these 10 sfirot, the 10 aspects of God. There's a book called Sefer Yetzirah. And in this book, it talks about how God manifests himself in God's personality, and that personality is what's called the 10 sfirot. Okay, I told you this is going to be a bit Kabbalistic, this whole thing that we're going to learn, but we'll try to make it as user-friendly as possible. The idea is supposed to be to give us a little idea that God is infinitely distant from us, infinitely distant. God is far above the spiritual, and that same God that is infinitely distant from us is not even in the category of spiritual. It creates the spiritual. That God cares about us, me and you, individually. And he listens to our individual prayers. Whether you're a Jew, you're a non-Jew, God is infinitely close. He cares. You listen to all. So we got to get an idea of what this God is. So, and how does God do it? I mean, how does God do it? If he's really infinite, so how can we possibly pray to him and he answers our prayers? I mean, that makes him finite. How could he give a finite Torah? So this is what we're explaining. So God is one, and he's not a number of one. And God also emanates what's called 10 sfirot, 10 aspects. And these 10 aspects of God, they're called tikkunim. They are called, for our purposes, we'll call them tikkunim. The Rebbe is going to say that these are just like precious jewelry. We'll see in a minute. Jewels. A person has clothes, but he also has jewels. So the clothes are not so precious to him as jewels. We'll see. Tikkunim. So God has what's called 10 sfirot. Those are called, in the Zohar, they're called tikkunim. Tikkunim means like fixings. I want to call it aspects, for lack of a better word. Right? In order to understand this, let's understand this by understanding ourselves. Hello? Questions? Answers? No. In order to understand this, we have to understand a little bit about ourselves. And we can't start off thinking about God because we don't know what it is, but at least we know that we exist. Right? Here we are. And a human being is also pretty complicated. Huh? Humans are pretty complicated when it comes right down to it. Here we have a body, and we have speech. Person speaks, acts, which is preceded by thought. So that's a little bit sort of concealed inside of the person's body a little bit, but it expresses itself in the body, especially speech and action. But then behind the speech and action, there's also a person's personality, his emotions. And behind those emotions, usually there's some sort of awareness, values, and things like that it controls his emotions. So man is made in the image of God. So a little bit by examining ourselves, how humans manifest themselves or what a human being is, we can understand a little bit about what God is. Because the Torah says that God created man in his image, right? That's right in the beginning. Okay, so let's see what this is. We have to explain what is the soul. Soul. So there's an interesting thing about the soul. If a person is, God forbid, sick and unconscious, and he can't move, nevertheless, you cannot kill that person. According to Judaism, you're not allowed to kill that person. You can't stop that person from living. It's a very deep and complicated legal question in Judaism. When is it permissible to pull the plug and etc.? Very deep, but nevertheless, it's a big question because the soul is not your personality. Even though, grandpa or whatever, he can't talk and he can't speak and he can't move and he's no sign, but he's alive. He's alive, then his soul is still there. Means if you take that soul away, it's killing him. It's killing him. Like I say, it's not that simple. There's sometimes when it's okay to pull the plug, or if a person is in big pain, but nevertheless you can't. The soul is something which is, the point is, the soul is not your personality. From your soul comes your personality, comes your consciousness and your emotions and your. Okay, so let's understand what is exactly the soul. What is exactly a person? A nefesh mitzaratz, the soul in itself, or pashut, it is a simple light, simple, what do you call it, consciousness. Belid chalkut, without any division, seichel of intellect and emotions. Vaseichel v'amidot, and the intellect of a person and his emotions, hey, they are levushin, they're just garments. They're garments to the soul. Shanefesh, that the soul has intellect and it has emotions. But your intellect and your emotions are not the essence of your soul. Huh? If so, this whole famous axiom of Descartes, I think, therefore I am aware, that's wrong. Because even if you don't think and even you're not aware, you still are. Because your soul is still there. A person that's totally unconscious, he's a person. So the soul is something which is indescribable. Okay. Let's see what this goes up to. Wait 1 second. Oh, it's here. Ella, but she'ain, your intellect and your emotions. Maybe we'll go back to this. These were added on by the Rebbe's, by the first Rebbe's, like his grandson, wherever they. Okay. Ella, but it's Kabbalistic enough as it is. Let's just keep it. Ella, but she'aim nikraim, your intellect and your emotions are not your soul. That's not really you, but they are what's called tikkunim. They're like called, if you want to call it, precious jewelry. She'anefesh mitakenet umitlabeshes them. That the soul is expressed, and it is, how do you say it? It reveals itself through the intellect and the emotions. Ukamo Targum Onkelos, like Onkelos, he translates on the pasuk Lo Yubash Gever Simlat Isha. There's a commandment in the Torah: a man should not put on the garments of a woman. It says Lo Yitaken Gever Betikune Itza. A man should not yitaken, fix himself up like the fixings of a woman. Tikkun means garments. Garments. We'll see. There's different types of garments. Wait. So there's your intellect and your emotions are just garments of the soul. That's what Elijah the prophet meant. Says, God, you are one and you're not a numerical one. And you emanate 10 garments. What? So it's the same thing with God. God's personality, the God's wisdom, the Torah, etc. That's not the essence of God, but they are manifestations of God's essence. The Inyan Tikkun and this idea that the essence of the soul is fixed up. This is like the language of like jewelry. That you put it on, and you are affected by it. You are united with this garment, as though it is part of you. Well, come on, this is a little bit sort of, let's take the example of a king with a crown. Maybe that's an example of a king with a crown. I know there's usually religious men don't have any jewelry or whatever. I personally don't. I like jewelry. I don't have a ring. Jewish men don't wear rings. They don't. I mean, religious Jewish men, they don't wear rings. Very rarely do they even wear watches, wrist watches. I guess they do in order to tell the time, if they really have to. But it's usually cheap watches. They don't make a big deal. But I think that you're aware of the fact that jewelry is much more expensive than garments. I'm not in the clothing business. I don't know. But I know that there's watches that are worth like $1 million, right? Watches that are $20 million. There are watches with rhinestones in them. Precious watches, rings, not what to talk about. But let's take an example like a king's crown. Right? A king's crown. When the king puts on the crown, he's a different person totally. It changes him totally. Something that's precious. So that's the idea. With women, you can especially see it. They have jewelry. Women put on jewelry, right? Like in places, New York and things like, you can't walk around with jewelry because somebody will steal it. Nevertheless, they try. They walk around with jewelry. That's them. I don't know how exactly what they do, but a woman, she puts on, this is jewelry. What a necklace. This is such a crown, a thing, whatever it is, a bracelet, a bracelet, a footlet, this. She puts it on. This makes a different mesh. You're a different person. You have jewelry on. Just like the soul with the body. Even though your body is just a garment for the soul, but it's like precious jewelry. It like becomes part of you. When your body, when you stub your toe or your finger, margeshet nefesh, the soul feels it. So it's like somebody that has precious jewelry and it gets stolen. A person is your pants get stolen. Yeah, put another pair of pants on. You have nowadays, I think I don't know if it's always been that way, but also garments also become like jewelry, right? The woman has like a $50,000 dress. 50,000. I have a $200,000 dress. That's nothing. I have a $1 million dress. $1 million dress. Never said. It's a precious dress. The garments have become like jewelry. It's like something special. This is the person. This really makes you. But the Cain also Masha Ola, Baratzon and Nefesh. What goes up in a person's soul, he expresses it in his body. If only is a pu'ula be'evorim, so the limbs of your body are affected by your soul, like a person is affected by a precious jewelry. And it's like part of him. It's my thing. So take it from me out immediately. When a person goes in a person's mind, I want to move my finger, the finger moves, the foot walks, etc. Without any delay whatsoever. The intellect, your mind goes into your foot. If so, I'm sorry. If there was any sort of, if it wasn't totally united, there would be some sort of a delay between your thought and your deed. The Eno Shah, we see that it's not so. Immediately when it goes up in a person's will, he moves. If you've ever seen people, people are really into sports, especially you see this in like boxing. And in music, for sure, you see it. People move their fingers faster than a person can think. Faster than a person can think. No one would think that fast. There's pieces in your fingers move so fast. It's just a matter of your expression of your will. It's only because your body is united with the soul, and the soul has an effect on it, as though the soul and the body were one thing. Even though that your body is only just a goof, it's just a garment for the soul. Nevertheless, it is united with the soul. The body and the soul become one through what? By means of your will, by means of your intellect. Kamoke, and similarly, you can understand the idea of your intellect and your emotions of your soul. They are only just garments of the soul, and the soul becomes clothed in them. And they are, the soul is like, how do you say, enhanced by them. They are vessels of the soul. Through them, the soul can have an effect, can work like an axe in the hands of a wood chopper. In other words, your emotions and your intellect, those are not your soul, but the essence of the soul is affected and expressed through them. Therefore, when you love something, when God loves something, he expresses it through his aspect of love. And his awareness, so therefore, God's emotions and God's intellect, called these 10 sfirot, they are not God, but they are united, so to speak, with God's will and with God's essence. God expresses himself through them. That's what's called God's 10 sfirot. 10 sfirot. She calls it all this, and similarly is only pulat nefesh. It's only how the soul it instigates, it begins, it directs the body, expresses itself. It comes outward, but the soul itself is above all of these levels. That's the whole idea also of reincarnation. The soul itself never dies. Never dies. It never changes. It's affected very deeply by what you did and what you said and what you thought in the time of your life. But the soul itself, the essence is unchanging. Okay, there's also aspects of that, of the soul after a person dies. But the soul itself is undying. But on the other hand, the soul itself has no real personality. That's why it's very rare that people remember who their incarnations were from before, because it could be you're a totally different person with totally different ideas and totally different, you have no connection to who you were before. So you think, but there were big Kabbalists that could tell who you were. Because a person's intellect and emotions they can be changed. Because a person's emotions, he can be small, immature, and mature. That a child loves small things. But intellect, all the time that a person gets older, he becomes more mature, he understands more deeper. So the intellect and the emotions, even though that's a person's personality, and that, so to speak, is the person, but they change, this is not relevant to the essence of the soul. The essence of the soul is not relevant to change at all. Okay, but this does not mean that it has nothing to do with the world, because the same thing with God is God's essence is connected to the world. That's the Torah. The Torah is not, as we said, just a hobby of God's. God's not really interested in that. And God is really, really, really interested in this physical world. The same thing with the essence of the soul. The essence of the soul comes into a body, not just because it just happened to would have stepped on an open manhole or something and just fell down. Wow, and the soul, but it's places in heaven. No, the essence of the soul is supposed to be in the body. That's the whole idea of the raising of the dead. Okay, but as it is now, as we see, there's the essence of the soul, which that is, so to speak, no personality at all. And then there's your intellect and your emotions, right? And then there is your actions which come out. Okay, but the essence of the soul itself does not receive any changes from the body. The Eino Mitlabeshes, and it is not, the essence of the soul is not in the body. Ella, but Ha'arotel, only just a ray of it, the kochotel, or its powers, she'ein mitpashtot, that they spread out into the body, and they are clothed in the body. They receive changes from the body, the external. When a child is small, so his emotions are small. When he gets older, so his emotions change, and etc. Good. Okay, so we can't really explain how God does this, but we can at least describe the fact that that's the God the Jews believe in. God is powerful. God is kind. God is merciful. God is good. God is all these things. All these are just aspects of God. But the essence of what God is beyond description. Beyond description. And all these aspects of God, they do not detract from God's essence whatsoever. That's a big mystery. But if you don't say so, then what are you saying? That there's God and that there's also something else. So that's like all these, Greek gods and Roman gods. In Hinduism, they have all these different gods and these different things, because that makes sense, because God is like the overseer of the whole business, and then he's got his ministers and things like that, and you pray to them. You don't pray to God. But God also intellect and emotions, they are only just aspects of the soul and its powers that spread in the body, but they are not the essence of the soul at all. But on the other hand, the soul, the soul does bring out, and it spreads out and expresses itself through these powers and lights of God. So on one hand, we say it's not affected, but on the other hand, it is affected, because we see that the soul is spread out through what it does. And a person can't say, I didn't steal the money, my hand stole the money, or my emotions stole the money, but what there is a lot of times in Unfortunately, this is being grossly misused in America now. But they say the man, that's not, he's innocent. He's a product of his environment. He's a product of his environment. In America now, they took it to this ridiculous, totally destructive place where they say that, all of the black people, all the blacks, all the Negroes, they're all products of their environment. If they kill, if they steal, if they rob, if they rape, whatever they do, it's because they were oppressed. They were oppressed. That's not the real them. It's not the real person. Why is this guy a mass murderer? What do you want? His father was a mass murderer. His grandfather was a mass murderer. He inherited the poor guy. He had a terrible background. How he killed all these people. It's not his fault. What do you mean it's not his fault? The essence of his soul is pure. It's good. It's just that because he was twisted in this, the outside of his soul got messed up. Okay, I mean, there could be a point to that. But this is a very twisted way of looking at justice. But on the other hand, it's got a good point. The point is that there is such a thing as the essence of the soul, and the essence of the soul is always good. It's always good. Which this idea of the original sin, and we're all sinners, we have to be saved, that's not so. That's not so. That's a lie. And the essence of the soul is always good. But nevertheless, if a person steals, he gets punished. If a person kills, he can get a capital punishment. Because you can say, okay, so we're not punishing the essence of the soul. The essence of the soul is okay. We're just punishing the aspects of the soul, right? So, nevertheless, says the Rebbe says, the essence of the soul is not your personality. Your personality, even though they are connected to the essence of your soul, and they express the essence of your soul, but they are only garments. They are only garments, but they are not separate garments like thought, speech, and action. The thought, speech, and action, they are just really emanations and garments really of the soul. But your intellect and your emotions, these are very close to you. This is like your body of the soul. It's like a person has a body and he has garments. But your garments you can change all the time, but your body is very difficult to change. You have to make they have these people that make faceliftings and the body enhancement and things like that. Okay, but that's a big operation. To change your shirt and your pants is no big deal. So your shirt and your pants, that's like your thought, speech, and action. And your body, that's like your emotions, what you love, your intellect, what you're aware of, your consciousness. So that's what it says. But your consciousness, your intellect, and your emotions, they are also garments, but these are garments for the essence of the soul. The Eino Levushim Mamish, they're not separate garments, but they're what's called tikkunim. They're like jewelry, precious jewelry, that your essence is fixed up by them. Kamo, just like tikkun, a takshi, just like when a person puts on a king puts on a crown, so miyapeh adam, it makes him beautiful. It changes his whole essence. Alder says similarly, we can understand Lamaila by God. Up to now, we've understood ourselves. Let's understand the same thing by God. And the 10 sfirot, which are also called tikkunim. What are these 10 sfirot? This is the intellect and the emotions of Atzilut. And I'll explain this, and that'll be the class. Atzilut. The Atzilut, God and his bodies are one. But in Bria, Yetzir, and Asiya, they are only garments. And there it says, Levushin, Tekinas, that there are garments. Okay, here we go. So there are what's called 4 general dimensions of godliness. Each one of them has these 10 sfirot of God. Everything in the world has 10 sfirot of God. Everything in the world, you can break it down to these 10 aspects of intellect and emotion. Intellect is like the plan of everything, a rock. You have a plan, a definition of whatever it is, what a rock is. You can break it down intellectually, the intellectual components of how do you define a rock and what a rock is made of, and the chemical composition of a rock. And then you have the emotions. The emotions is where the rock is. That, so to speak, is God's is chesed. The limitations of the rock, the boundaries, that's gevura. The fact that everything is balanced, it maintains its identity. That's like tiferet. So everything that there is in the world has 10 sfirot in it. But essentially, God manifests himself in what's called 4 dimensions, even though there's infinite numbers of dimensions, but it's broken down to 4 dimensions of godliness. Each dimension is infinitely more real than the dimension which is below it. And it includes it. And I know I've given this example before, but it's like you have a cube and a plane and a line and a dot. So inside of there's an infinite number of points, a dot, a point. According to geometry, there's an infinite number of points in a line. Because you can take a line, you can divide it up. And then there's an infinite number of lines in a plane. Then there's an infinite number of cubes, an infinite number of planes in a cube. Because you can take a cube, you can slice it. This is all ideologically. A theoretical cube, you can slice it into an infinite number of layers, right? So it comes out that there's an infinite number of planes in a cube, and an infinite number of lines in a plane, an infinite number of points in a line. So how many points are there in a cube? So like 3 times infinite. Doesn't make any sense. So something like this is these 4 dimensions of godliness. Each one has its 10 sfirot. Each one is like a world in itself, you want to call it. Each one is called an olam, a world. But these are 4 dimensions of reality. We are only in this world, we're only privy to the lowest of the low, which is called Asiya. We see the physical world, and in the physical world, we don't see any godliness at all. Yeah, a little bit, you see a sunset or something like that. And then there's the world above that. That's the world of the angels. And the angels are also going crazy because they know that there's dimensions of godliness, reality above theirs. Then above that is what's called the world of the souls. That's the world of Bria. It's also called the upper heaven. In any case, all these levels are dimensions of godliness. Dimensions of godliness. But the highest of these 4 is what's called Atzilut. And Atzilut, so to speak, is not a dimension of godliness. But Atzilut is revealed godliness. It is not pure God. It's still part of the world. It's called a world. But it's still pure godliness. Now, I just wanted to, I mean, maybe if you noticed, I have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about over here. Because we're talking about God, and I don't know what God is. But I do know that God creates us. I do know that God gave the Torah. God took the Jews out of Egypt. Right? At least that's what I believe. But on the other hand, I also know that I don't see God, and that God it took us out of Egypt, and I couldn't take anybody out of Egypt. I don't even know what that means. Creating the world, how could I create I don't know what it means to create anything. And God is creating the world. So Judaism explains, especially in Kabbalah, they explain that it's all true, but the essence of God is infinitely, like 4 times infinite from us, from our, it's a different dimension, totally than what we are. A dimension of reality. And that's infinitely more real than we are. That's only the world of Yetzirah. Bria, the world of Bria, is infinitely more real than the world below it. And Atzilut, okay. So there when we talk about these 10 sfirot, we're going to do this tomorrow. I told you this is going to be a little bit Kabbalistic. These 10 aspects of God, which are called the 10, we said just fixings or 10 jewelry or whatever that expresses his essence, that's talking about the world of Atzilut. Generally speaking, when we talk about sfirot, the spheres of God, we're talking about this 4th aspect of God dimension, the highest dimension of godliness, which is called the world of Atzilut. That's the wisdom, the 10 sfirot, the chachma, and the emotions of Atzilut. That up there, everything is pure oneness. But in Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya, the lower 3 dimensions, these are what's called the garments. That's not like the jewelry that's united with you. That's like the garments. Or if you want to call it another way, say that Atzilut is like the body of God, And Bria, Yetzir, and Asiya, that's like the garments that God puts on. Now, it's not the essence of God, because these are only expressions of God, but nevertheless, they are totally one with God. All there is, God is one. There's nothing outside of God. But these expressions of what godliness is what enables us to be a separate world. And that's what God wants. That's the whole point of the whole business. All of these Kabbalistic ideas that we're learning about, the whole point is just that should come down into the world that you and me and the trees and the bugs and the flowers, that all that should be here. That's the whole point of all this Kabbalistic stuff we're learning about. This physical world. But in order to appreciate this world the way that God appreciates it, is we have to understand a little bit about how distant we are from understanding how real God is. And that we'll talk about more, God willing, tomorrow. Okay, now let us learn